So the name of the presentation is The Search for Meaning at Work, Connecting Purpose, Progress, and Engagement. And this just came out from McKinsey and Company related to this idea of the search for meaning at work. 2/3 of the people surveyed said that COVID caused them to reflect on their purpose in life. And I'm kind of like scratching my head thinking, what about the other 1/3? So how about you? Have you personally, and by the way, use the chat feature, and Mike and Zoe and everybody will probably jump in and maybe share some of those things if we can, interject. Let's make this interactive and fun. And I want to give you value here today, and rather than just be lecture oriented. So, but here's the thing: half of those people also that they surveyed said they're reconsidering the kind of work that they do. Interesting. So there's been this sort of reset or transformation. And I wanted to get your thoughts as experts in the human capital world here with Beacon. So we can look at the negatives of this, right? But what are the positives? What are the positives you see as a result of this sort of people reorienting themselves to purpose and actually reconsidering the kind of work that they're doing? What are the positives? Let's hear a couple ideas from you all. Jump in.
Well, let's hope people will be happier.
Okay. If they find it, right? Or even in the search for it. Good.
Ultimately, the culture, behaviors, feelings, and attributes of employees drive outcomes of the organization.
Right. So if they have more purpose, we'll see that connection about the outcome being driven a little harder, more engaged. Good. What else?
I think organizations, you'll start to see organizations actually change to match that desire, because clearly they want the best talent, right? And clearly they want revenue. So if they can retain those and merge that with that purpose that they're searching for, that may be a change in the whole environment marketplace.
I think people are demanding better leadership, and they're not, in the past, I always say people leave their leader not for more money, but I do think that it's going to drive a major change in how leaders interact and motivate their people.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, I think it has caused people too to kind of reinvent themselves. Some of us found ourselves with a little bit more time on our hands, so it gave us the opportunity to do things such as network and go back to school. So I think it allowed a lot of people to kind of reinvent themselves and sharpen their skills.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sharon.
And I think it has us looking at our whole selves as opposed to just our careers. For years, many of us have just focused on our careers. And now it has us looking at all the other things in our life that make us the person we are.
Yeah, we've experienced 14 months with our family and our dogs, and really trying to, we've gone down to the lowest rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Being safety and security. And we realize that, how we influence that even with our family holistically is elevated importance. Wow, I mean, you guys have just given more thoughts than I even realized about the positives coming out of this. But I just want to tap on something Joe said. So if it's true, what Joe said, that this is going to transform probably the way companies even shape their organizations, then we have an opportunity, if we're an employer or a consultant working with employers, to be that place that people want to go. In other words, there's going to be more of the haves and the have-nots in terms of, is this place a place where I can really find my purpose in life? Are they giving me that opportunity? That's sort of the rhetorical question they're asking themselves. And if we can shape this or help shape it, depending on your role, man, what an incredible influence this is going to have. So one of the things I wanted to suggest that everyone should be doing right now is a culture audit. And the most basic form of this would be to, if you have a list of values, which of the values do you need more emphasis on going forward? Like, that's a simple question to ask your senior team or involve everybody. Like, let's look at our list of values, gang. Like, which ones of these do we need to really focus on now going forward to bring purpose and meaning to people and create this environment? And by the way, if you look at your list and none of them really applied during COVID, you might as well push them off to the side and start over. Right? That's a fair thing. This is a really good time to do that if they've been sitting in the bottom drawer. Time to sort of, look at those. Are they still relevant? What do we need now? And then go forward. And here's another thing that that I think is a huge factor right now. Quote from Adam Grant, but he said the most direct way to figure out what's really valued in a culture isn't just to listen to what people say is important. We want to know that. It's to pay attention to who gets rewarded and promoted into leadership roles, especially during this time. So everyone's watching. We know, coming out of this time, who are the heroes and who were not. People are looking to see who gets promoted as a result of how they behaved, how they acted, how they lived up to your culture in your organization. And here's something else that's really important that sends an amazing message. Who needs to move out as a result of that? So when that person who's been, maybe they've actually been productive, but they're a toxic person, and we finally show them the door, what's the reaction from everybody else in the organization when you do that? What do they normally say to you in the hallway?
Took so long.
What took so long, right? It's the ultimate message. So culture audit, and then figuring out who's gonna go up, who maybe needs to move out, will send this reset message to everybody. So I just wanted to include that in the presentation here, just to get us going. But what we're really all after is this idea of people being engaged at work. So we can build this, I call it the ultimate competitive advantage, when we can scale this idea of engagement across our enterprises. So what I want to do today is just talk about purpose and meaning and how it helps to drive this, but I want to frame out engagement on the front end, so we're all sort of calibrated on the when I talk about engagement, what do I mean by it? So I use a very simple definition for engagement. The extent to which a person chooses, and chooses is the operative word here, the most important word, chooses to apply their energy, talent, and care. That could be toward anything, a small project or an enormous project, an encounter with a customer, an encounter with another employee. So when we look at energy, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but it's really about that mojo that somebody brings, that acts of diligence and willingness to act now, that sense of urgency. When we think of talent, it's really leveraging your strengths, like going into your experience box and being able to apply these things, thinking creatively and accountably to seek the ideal outcome. That person's really utilizing their talent. And isn't it a shame when you say, boy, they have a lot of potential, but they just didn't use it? And then the last one, which I think it's my favorite, is care. This is that deeply held value of empathy and the pride to go the extra mile and the effort that we take at work. And it's a human connection that we build, that we deliver through our own personality. Have you been to retail stores lately where people just, they check their personality at the door and they come in and they're just a robot? I always wonder, like, man, is that really the real you, or are you just that lazy and bored that you are not even injecting your own personality here? Have some freaking fun, and make it happen. So it's this choice to apply these things in any given time that makes the real difference. So I want to show it in relationship to performance now. And almost everybody figures out that there's a line of minimum requirements that if you go below the line, you're maybe in jeopardy of losing your job or getting in trouble in some way. Everyone sort of figures that out wherever they are in their particular organization. And the people that generally exhibit the minimum amount of energy, talent, and care have figured that out, and they just kind of dance above the line. And then there's other people that exhibit sort of this maximum energy, talent, and care. Not all the time, but most of the time. The difference between that yellow line and the green line, I call it the discretionary effort gap. This is your culture. Where are you on this gap? And the idea of what we do in the culture shaping business is we move everything up. We move that red line up and we move the green line up. And then we start scaling, this idea, these choices that people make to exhibit their energy, talent, and care across the entire enterprise at every level. That's kind of the macro here. So that's the huge opportunity and why it leads to performance. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, that's great, but what causes people to make the choice? And I want to share with you just a couple quick highlights from what I consider the most in-depth study that's ever been done on what really engages people at the grassroots level. And it was done by Harvard Business School. Dr. Teresa Amabile led the survey, led the study. It was done over several years and it was done through a diary study, which is very intense. And here's what they discovered, that everyone has this sort of inner work life going on. And I like that term because it's sort of that, what you see underneath the proverbial iceberg, right? The perceptions and thoughts that they have, their motivation and their desire to do the work and their emotions. And they found when things were positive, when those items, that inner work life was positive, that they measured the performance of those individuals, and it came out in 4 incredible dimensions of creativity, productivity, commitment. In other words, sticking with the problem longer when the doo-doo hits the fan. And then collegiality, which is sort of an old-fashioned term for collaboration with other people. It's like, who doesn't want that, right? So positive inner work life, driving performance. The next question is, what gives people a positive inner work life? And so the discovery that they made at Harvard through the open-ended questions on the diary was, and this took a lot of work on their part, but when people were indicating in the diaries that they were making progress in meaningful work, boom, it allowed inner work life to go off the chart, leading to performance. So here's the cool thing about this. And, as sort of a glass as half full kind of optimist person that I am, it confirms once and for all that people want to do a great job at work. Maybe that's a surprise to some managers who think, oh, I got to come in and manage these people. Like, because they, if I let them go, they're going to run out of the pasture here. If people are naturally wired to come to work to do a great job, we just have to get out of their freaking way and create the conditions for them to be successful. So what I want to do today is just give you a couple ideas, capitalizing on this idea from Harvard Business School is about making progress in meaningful work. How do we do that from a practical sense? And here's what we do. We create the condition for people to have wins and to know that they have wins and realize that they are making progress. So how many of you, just with a sort of a show of hands here, if you can, how many of you have ever done something, then written it down on your to-do list, and then check the box? Anybody besides me? Okay, Morris, I see you're insane too, right? Well, there's a good reason why we do this, actually, and I think it connects to the survey data. When we do that, we actually get a hit of dopamine. We get free drugs by writing things down on our list and checking it off. And we get some serotonin too, which is sort of that relaxing, sense of accomplishment. And, us HR nerds, we call it self-efficacy. So it's the idea of creating small wins and in accomplishing things, making progress. Now, one of the best examples I can give you of somebody who did this on a regular basis was Andy Grove from Intel. Remember Intel? It's in your computer. Never seen the chip, but I know it's important, right? Andy Grove, who's the founder, would legendarily walk around the floor of his designers and his software engineers and just come up to, let's say he came up to Sharon Sharon, hey, what are your 1, 2, 3s today? And basically he was asking this question, like, what's a really high priority for you today? Not in general, like working here at Intel, what's your purpose in life? What are you trying to do today? Because that's setting up the conditions for them to check the box to get it done. Now, he had them so wired on this that they started asking each other this all the time. In other words, they knew what they were trying to work on in a compressed time frame. This is genius. It's not micromanagement. It's actually just sort of identifying what those small wins are within the compressed time. He's not telling them how to do it. He just wants to know what are they trying to do that would give them a win. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, here's my big fancy PowerPoint slide of the day, my metaphor to share with you. This idea of making progress that's meaningful is much like an aircraft, an airliner coming into Philadelphia International. When they get about 10 miles out, the airport clicks on the glide path radar, and that plane has that indicator inside their cockpit that says, wow, we're on the glide path. We just need to make adjustments based on this particular scope of radar that's coming from the airport. When you get out of that beam, like whoop, 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 everything goes off in the cockpit. So in our lives, when we have a clear purpose, when we know what we're trying to win on, it's like we are inside that beam and getting the receptor of like, I'm making progress towards something. Making progress toward a purpose is what gives us meaning. Let me just say that again. Making progress toward a purpose, you can call it a goal, you can call it a potential small win, gives us meaning. Sometimes we look at this idea of purpose and meaning so big, like we can't get our arms around it. This is actually right down to the granular level. And by the way, if we're not challenged at work, we may find ourselves in a sort of a holding pattern. We're lost in the clouds. Or if we're doing work that seems like below our dignity or all the time, we can actually feel like we're crashing and burning. We want to stay within that beam. So that's the whole idea here. So how do we do this? How do we clarify this? Because the clear goals, which came out of the survey data at Harvard, were the #1 catalyst of progress. And it set up this idea of how to amplify meaning when you're making progress toward it. So here's the other kind of cool thing related to this idea, which translates into performance. Performance, remember, creativity is one of the dimensions. So Teresa Amabile said, when people have a clear sense of where they're going, they're flexible and creative on how to get there. We're at A, hey team, we're at A, we need to get to B. So how are we going to do that? Let them figure it out and they're going to be creative. But if I do a really good job of identifying what B looks like, what does done look like? What does success look like? Can I paint the vision for what B looks like? People are going to get there in an unbelievably creative, novel ways and feel engaged and empowered, self-empowered along the way. So that's part of the challenge here. Okay. So I'm going to show you this grid, which shows the relationship on the axis to the left. There is all about purpose. Do they have a high clarity of purpose or a low clarity of purpose? And on the bottom is, are they making progress toward it? Or are they lost in the clouds? Are they stuck or are they productive? Okay, so I want to review this. And after I do, I'm going to give you a chance in a breakout to talk about where you personally are and also maybe what your reflections of your team, if you have a team that reports to you. And the most important thing is, what can you do about it? Okay, so let me just quickly review this. If you're stuck and you have no idea what your purpose is, what your goals are, people are disengaged. There's no doubt about it. You're sort of unattached and unapplied, just sort of floundering away. A lot of times you might describe that person as sort of a bitter pill at work. That's like a term my mom used to use, like, boy, they're a bitter pill. I don't know if people use that anymore. It works for me. And the result is they quit, yet they stay. We have some of those in the organization. In other words, they figured out where that line was, where that discretionary effort line, they quit and then they stay right there. It's terrible. Now, what if they have high clarity of purpose, but they're stuck? They're not making progress. They're stuck and stalled. This is that person who's like pulling their hair out. Okay. And you might call them the righteous ineffectual. In other words, they're really right. Like, I understand why we're doing this, but they can't make progress because of bureaucracy or whatever barriers there are in the organization. And the result is if they're a high performer and they want those results, they're going to leave and go find a place that gives them that. So what about if you're making a lot of progress, but you know what? The clarity and the purpose is just not clear. Like, I just feel like I'm making the donuts every day and I'm making them as fast as I can. And this place, my hair's on fire at this place. I'm overloaded. I'm stressed in effort. You might call this person the martyr. Like, hey, how you doing there, Mike? Oh man, I'm totally burnt out. I'm busy, and people have that response and they get burned out. Now, here's where we want to go. We want to have high clarity of purpose, and we want to be able to make progress toward that. If you are there, fulfilled, you're at more grace and ease often, and you might call this person the engaged doer, and the result is the high performance that we looked at earlier. So, Zoe, I don't know if you're able to put folks into a group together, but what I'd like you to do, let me ask the question again. Where are you personally? Share that with your colleagues there very quickly. And if you have a team, where do you see them mostly? And then if you have enough time, we'll give you about 8 minutes or so to do this. What can you do about it? How can you get yourself up into that green quadrant there? Okay? Clear as mud?
All right.
All right. Thanks, Zoe.
Sounds good, Steve.
All right. Thank you. Everybody back, Zoe? Can we tell?
Yep, everyone's back.
All right, cool. Well, I just want to take a couple minutes and hear your thoughts, like what you discussed there. Where do you see yourself and your team? And if anybody had some fabulous ideas on how you can influence this to get to the green quadrant, fire away. So who'd like to share?
Go
Hey,
ahead,
Michael,
Laura.
do you want to share from our team with me and you and Paula, even though we didn't come up with some answers, we discussed what we thought people were?
Yeah, it was interesting because we shared stories of our children in the workplace, that millennials, and we felt that big picture that most employees are stuck, if you will, on the left side. There's a lot of short-term pressure for results with companies. Turnover for CEO is at a record high. They're turning over every 3 to 4 years. And there's a lot of short-term thinking that results in a lot of pressure towards employees to perform. And also companies are trying to do more with less. They're trying to, from a cost savings, so they're cutting people. People are doing the work of 2 and 3 people. And it's causing a lot of burnout and disengagement. And we didn't get to the conversation about what we can do, but I think managers have to just step up and do things. If try to go back to the values and principles of that organization, and try to uplift some of these employees, because I sense a lot of employees are on the left-hand side. They're just burned out and disengaged.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Great. Anybody else? Maybe take another person.
Well, our group, we were all on the right-hand side,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
but the half of us were overloaded and the other half we were jealous of. So, but one of the things I think that Laura and Leslie were talking about in our group was that if your teammates are in a quadrant other than the upper right, does that sort of drag the team down? And how we were sort of talking about how or whose responsibility is it to bring everybody to that level or to make the vision clear, et cetera. But, how can you, as someone who's on the team what can you do if you're feeling overloaded and you realize it's because, hey, these other folks aren't, I'm going to say, pulling their weight, or everybody doesn't feel fulfilled, and you feel like that's dragging you down.
Yeah, it's about asking the question, like, what might we do to help those people, or asking them how they're feeling in that given situation to find out where they might be. So I think you can use this grid almost as a quick analysis, or even in a team meeting, to say, where are we? Where do we need to be? What's lacking here? If you're the leader, you obviously can insert purpose, make it more clear for them. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do that. And then in terms of making progress, there's some questions that we can ask, like, what's standing in the way? Like, what's causing us to be stuck or frustrated here? What's the bureaucracy that stands in the way? So there are some things that we absolutely can do. And I hope these slides will be available if this grid helps you to sort of do a quick analysis. But I wanted to give us some ideas here on how we can amplify meaning. I really turn up that one a portion of the grid there where people see high purpose. So this is a model that I have constructed that shows the most important thing to know about this is that most companies and leaders get this idea of where meaning and purpose come from. They're too narrow focused on it. They're all about, like, how your work benefits the company. Here's how your work benefits the company. Maybe they go over, here's how your work influences a customer. Great, those are really important things. But the research shows that people get purpose and meaning from work from many different facets, not just those. I mean, what if your company produces paper clips? Like, are you really going to be excited about that? So if you're making heart valves or like COVID drugs, like, yeah, this idea of world society and the customer and the company is way high. But in terms of amplifying it, our best opportunities are right here: self-satisfaction. And then we saw from COVID how your work reflects on your family. People do amazing things for their work partner. If you're not sure about that, ask any person who ever served in the military and had bullets flying over their head. Your team. And then here's the other one that's often underestimated by managers. They themselves are an amplifier of meaning. In other words, people work really hard to please the manager, and the manager doesn't realize that. They're looking for this sense of belonging and acceptance from the manager themselves. So I wanted today, because we don't have time to go into all of this, I outlay this in my book, and each one of these is its own dedicated chapter on what you can do about it. But I want to focus on self-satisfaction and your role as a manager on how you can influence that. So first of all, belonging, this idea of self-satisfaction. Now, this word has surfaced now as one of the number one drivers of engagement at work as a result of what we just experienced. What does belonging mean to you? I'd like to hear one person just jump in and share with us, what does it mean? Bless you.
Part of the gang.
I'm part of it. Yeah. Okay. Good.
I would say part of the solution, whatever you're trying to do, part of the goal or the solution.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I'm included as part of an integral part that's moving things forward.
Yeah, excuse me. I would say knowing or being able to see how what you're doing is impacting the big picture.
Yes, that's absolutely part of it too. And sometimes it's just as simple as feeling respected. I belong here. Like, people respect me in this place. And I think that's why, coming out of COVID, this idea of belonging has been elevated, because those relationships, those respected feelings give meaning to people. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but here's a couple of ways that we can make sure people feel included at work. It's all about asking questions. These are free things that we can do as a manager to help them feel like they're included. What's your opinion on, remember the people that said they're stuck and frustrated? What's your opinion on how we can move things forward? Or how do you think we can improve things here in terms of productivity? The boss doesn't have all the answers to this. We need to ask. If you were your own boss, how might you change things? It's kind of a passively aggressive question, isn't it? I love that one. And by the way, you're going to get some amazing answers if you ask a question like that. And then just really understanding where their passion comes from, that you care enough to ask, like, what gets you jazzed about the work that you're doing here? So I have a lot of, examples here, but it's about pulling that person in and feeling included, that they are part of the solution and moving things forward. Now, here's kind of the bonus question. Like, ask them, like, what's a stupid idea around here? What's keeping us stuck? What's an assumption that we're making about our work that we could knock that right down? And oftentimes the manager or leader hears that, they go, that's not really a rule. Where'd you come up with that? We build these assumptions over time. Now, the other thing related to this idea of belonging comes from the term psychological safety and the amazing study that Google did, and it was called Project Aristotle. So long story short, they analyzed what the highest performing teams at Google all had in common, and they ranked them. And I'm just going to share the number one thing on the list. The teams that were the highest performing ones at Google, and by the way, if you're not a high performing team at Google, you're probably not around for very long, psychological safety. People feel safe and to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other, to ask those kind of questions, to share those things. So today is about giving you some practical ideas, and I wanted to show you one way that we could do this, even virtually, to build psychological safety, help people feel included, and to drive that sense of meaning and purpose at work. And I call it the virtual team player playbook. So here's the way this works. We want to share some things. If you have a virtual meeting or you're in person, hopefully soon, we want to get people to share things about themselves so we understand where they're coming from. So for example, you may notice that I'm stressed out when you see me blank. Imagine hearing that from each person around the Zoom call, around the table, to really understand, like, when they're at that stuck and frustrated point. Like you may see me like wigging out. You may see me check out. I may be really quiet. Well, now I understand where you're coming from. Here's another one related to personal preferences. So to help me be even more effective, I want feedback from you specifically on, imagine getting this around the table. Everyone understands what their permission is on giving feedback, the psychological safety to share. Hey, Dr. Laura, you asked about your presentation style, but I noticed that you did a couple things here that look really cool, and here's some ways you might improve. You invited me into that by sharing that. So here's personal perspectives. I love this question number 2. One value I've formed as a result of growing up in my hometown is that reveals a lot about people. I grew up in this little town in central Pennsylvania called Williamsport, home of Little League Baseball. There's a story behind that, right? So people might not know that, but they can understand where my values are as a result of some of the things I experienced in my hometown. And then, like, for example, number 7, one misperception people may have about me is, what's something that's out there that you want to sort of put to bed and clarify for people? So here, the whole idea is simply this. If we take the time and insert these things into the agenda of our meeting, knowing that it's going to lead to performance, this is a huge investment in them, in feeling included, making progress in meaningful work. So I just wanted to share, this is really granular stuff, but I want to share ideas and not just be at 30,000 feet. So it's a virtual team player playbook. So let me do a quick time check here. All right, we have a few more minutes. So I know you've probably all seen The Undercover Boss. And by the way, if you've seen one episode of The Undercover Boss, you've probably seen them all because they're all the same. And I did my own analysis on this because the bosses aren't they always shocked what people really go through when they finally like get out of their ivory towers and get down in the warehouse or the retail space or wherever they're amazed by how much people care. They can't believe it. They're like, oh my gosh. And they're usually deeply moved. A lot of times the tears are coming down their cheek at the end of the show by the person's personal motivation for why they're working. This is where they start talking about why they're sacrificing things for their family. And the boss goes, I had no idea. So I guess my challenge to most bosses are, what are you waiting for? I mean, if you know this ahead of time, like why don't we tap into this? So asking some of those questions on the virtual team player playbook can get right to it and uncover these things for psychological safety purpose. Now, here's the other thing that the boss can do that is really important in pulling people together to give them meaning. And I just want to ask you the question, like, it's not a trick question, but if I said, hey, great job, is that appreciation? What do you think? Would you call that appreciation?
It depends on how it's offered, its sincerity, its complexity, whether or not the person truly understands the job that was done. So it can run the full gambit of being an insult to being the best compliment.
Wow, okay. Well, yeah, may tee up. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, if it's that short, hey, great job. That seems more kind of, just a throwaway.
Yeah.
So I think to Lori's point, if they go, great job because, and then they demonstrate that they understood why it was a great job, maybe then you feel better.
Absolutely. And Lori, I want to tap into something you just said here in a moment that tells that greater story for it, because we really need to think of this going a little bit deeper in terms of meaningfulness to make it stick. Because a lot of times we can go on autopilot and just say, yeah, great job. And it's just sort of it's like saying thank you. Like it's really good to say thank you, but after a while we don't, or have a nice day, or like, how are you doing? Like no one really considers like, how are you doing when you say that? So I want to suggest to you that there's a way that we can tell the story to make it meaningful. And here's the mindset that we need to launch on here. It's about catching people doing things right. That's a different mindset. Like instead of catching people doing things wrong, I'm going to have eyes and ears to catch them doing things right. And I'm going to go beyond great job. So here's how we do this. And by the way, the reason I'm so like gung-ho about this concept is I was not great at this at all. And I'm leading a culture at QVC where we had as one of our values, this idea of appreciating each other and giving respect and concern to people. And I was like, first of all, I'm an introvert and I'm a guy. Like, I don't know how to say it sometimes really well. And if I'm not really 100% sure, I'm not going to say it at all. All right. So I had to learn and practice this by thinking about the story of how to appreciate somebody. I don't want to sound cheesy, inauthentic, whatever, disingenuous. So first of all, in telling the story per Lori's recommendation, we want to share with them what they did. What did you observe them doing? And then we want to demonstrate to them, we recognized how they did it. Okay, we recognize how they did. What did they do? And how they did it. And then here's the coup de grace on this thing. We want to share with them why it amplifies, the why piece will amplify meaning for them. We want to show them why it was important, why their behavior that they did. So here's an example. So I'll just use Mike Brenner since he's a buddy of mine. So Mike, what I appreciate about you is, and by the way, great job. Okay. You resolved a really difficult problem that we were having. I mean, everyone was scratching their heads, like wondering if we were ever going to accomplish this at all. And I know you helped resolve a difficult problem. And you did that by taking highly accountable ownership. I mean, this wasn't even an area of your responsibility. And yet you cared enough to share your ideas on how that happened. And this was really important because you got results when we needed them most. Everyone was feeling frustrated and stuck and stalled. And you were able to get us going with this the flywheel of momentum by doing that. I just want to thank you, Mike Brenner, for doing that. Now, do you see how I made great job into a story? So this is something that we need to practice on, just thinking it through. Now, I like to think that I've gotten to a pretty good level with this now. Yeah, do I have room to grow? Yes. And here's how I've done it. I find catching people doing things right everywhere I go. When I go to the grocery store and I notice that the bagger is taking the extra time to put all the fragile items like the eggs and saving them for the end to put on top, and then handing them to me and saying, hey, these are the fragile items, put them in your cart, I recognize them. Yeah, I just want to thank you for doing that. I noticed that you took the extra time, even though there's a gigantic line of people here. I just really appreciate that. And it's nice to know that you care. See how fast that was? Now, if the waitress or a waiter super serves you, especially now, we know that they've been pretty much like risking their life to do their work. A school teacher, a neighbor, who are the people? How about a family member? That might really shock them, right? My wife will fall over dead today if I give this to her. But this is what we need to do. Everywhere we go, it's about paying it forward in this sense. And we get really good at catching people doing things right. It's a mindset. That way, when we're at work, we notice these just sort of natural. It's baked into our DNA. Now, I want to give you guys, some of you know each other. I'm going to take a big risk here. Who on the Beacon team has appreciation for somebody else? And maybe you can follow the basic parameters here. I just would like to hear something real and live. Would anybody like to do that? I want to see if we can practice it.
I'll do it. Yeah, this is Bob Ferlata. And I'd just like to extend my appreciation to Morris Yankel. He was always welcoming from the very beginning of my introduction to Beacon, has been very helpful in networking and certainly helpful in terms of linking me to other organizations as well. So thanks very much, Morris.
There you go.
Thank
you, Bob.
Really appreciate that.
And I'll add one for Zoe. And I don't think there's anybody on this call or any other Zoom meeting that we have. Everything runs so smoothly and effortlessly. I co-chair another committee. We never have to worry about the quality, that everything's going to be smooth sailing, positive, pleasant. All the advance notices go out, the meetings run smoothly, it gets posted promptly. And, we get to look like, we're amazing people when it's Zoe who's doing all the work, who just quietly sits there and behind the curtain making everything happen. And we just come off as like, it was easy because Zoe did all the hard labor. So, and, as Morris shared in the beginning, we have so many events to have juggling all the balls or the plates on the sticks and nothing ever falls down. So outstanding job that makes us all look great.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I would concur with that with Zoe, just, having encountered her today. She's, wonderful. But see how you told that wonderful story there that felt natural but this is what we need to get good at. We can teach people in our businesses on how we do this. You literally have to practice with them, much the way we just did. Maya Angelou, you guys have all seen this quote before, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This is the idea of helping them feel like they belong, helping them see the meaning and purpose of being at work. Remember all those people considering whether to leave their companies or what they're going to do? If we can turn the equation here and build an environment, a culture where this is rich and it's part of who we are, not forced, but natural, supporting each other, that will make a humongous difference. And now my last slide here, the interesting thing, and the more I study about purpose and meaning in life and at work, is the more we give to others in this realm, the more we get back. When I just give some appreciation to that waitress or person at the grocery store, and I see the look on their eyes, like, wow, I get something back from that. That's not why I do it, but man, that's pretty good in reinforcement. So it's all about give to gain. So I just want to encourage you to think that through. So, and with that, I guess we'll have the slides available, but I'd love to connect with you. Amplify Meaning is my book website. And so I'd love to hear from you, or if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to be able to answer those. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Steve, when does your book come out?
It'll probably be in middle of next year. Yeah. So my manuscript's due December 31st. No pressure.
So thank you, Steve, for an outstanding and thought-provoking presentation. I can only speak for my breakout room. Obviously, it was the only one I was in, but we had a very interesting and robust discussion, and I can only imagine the other breakout rooms did as well. You've given us a lot to think about here this morning on this very, very important topic. So again, just to piggyback on what Steve was just saying a moment ago, we have a few minutes to ask questions or share your thoughts and experiences.
I had a question. So the meaning maker narrative, the what, the how, the why, is it seems to me that a lot of times people will say the what or the how, but they don't say the why.
Yeah.
And like when Lori or Bob said those wonderful things about, those wonderful people that they said the why. But when you're talking even to the grocery store folks, what why do you use? How do we get more of that why in there? What's in your head when you're trying to figure out the why part of that? Because that's also the piece that would make your wife pass out.
Yeah, right. I think essentially it's about, why do you appreciate what they did? So maybe it made you proud, like you're talking to a team member. Like, I'm really proud to work with you. I love that. This is the kind of thing that we need going forward. That's why it's really important. Or I noticed that when you did this, that the customer responded in a certain way. That's the kind of response we want from our customers to build our brand. That's the why. When you put the eggs on the top and hand them to me, it makes me feel good about coming to a store where they hire really great people like you. So what does it mean to you personally? And that's sort of the glue that holds that whole narrative together, I think.
I think, Morris, it doesn't have to be a long explanation or a deep why. One of the things, I go to Sal and Joe's. I know you'll know the restaurant, and I've been going for a gazillion years. And when my dad had passed away and I wasn't living in the area, my mother was the only place she would go alone, because they made her feel like she was part of their family. She wasn't sitting having dinner alone. And now I have continued on the tradition of going there. And one of the things, I like oregano on my pizza before it's cooked. And I now go, if I don't ask for it, the waitress who I get all the time says, don't forget the oregano. And I think, oh, I'm so glad you know what I like. I even forgot to mention it. And so I think that's an easy way to say thank you, to explain why, where you don't have to give volumes and go into great depths. And then a great way to show it is, instead of tipping like 20%, you tip 25%, or because, you know, she's had her hour so reduced because of, you know, people not going out to eat, that I tip even more. And the person I often go with is like, why would you tip $5 on a $15 bill? You know, so I think those are ways that you can let people know that they make a difference. You can have fun, you build a rapport if it's something you do over and over again.
I just want to say, hey, Steve, I'm sorry. Hi, Mike. And I'm glad. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I missed the first part of this, because I feel like I really missed something, because I got a lot out of just a small amount. But I want to say that last night I threw out a good job to people who work for me in a text without the story. So I just want you to know that this morning I will be following up with the rest of that story. And thank you for reminding me. It's important. It really is.
You're welcome. And this is extra challenging when our hair is on fire. We don't have a lot of time to, you know, great job. Feels like well, at least, you know, gave him something, a little nugget there, but yeah, well, good luck, Luann.
Yes, and giving you the why, I know that will make my organization stronger and better if I remember to give them that extra.
Great.
Thank you.
Steve, the meaning maker narrative is an opportunity for us to share with people what we value most. That's the why. We appreciate them because they're demonstrating our why, what we believe in, what we think is important, what attributes we believe are important in the workplace. So thank you for that, for simplifying that way of communicating that in a very impactful but short manner.
Oh, cool. That's a good way to think of it, Charlie. Yeah, it's really a value that we hold, that we're expressing. And that's one of our values. I noticed that you cared that much. Wow, that's really awesome. A good way to think of it.
Think if they did the opposite. How would you react then? Because it goes against your values. It goes against what you believe is a good practice for the business or just for human beings in general.
Yeah, no, good point. Absolutely.
I think the other thing that it does as a leader is you're modeling behavior for everybody around you.
Exactly.
You know, I didn't get a chance to mention that, but if you want to shape a culture and create those expectations of what remember discretionary effort, remember those bands that I showed you? This is the way to do it, because people will rise to that occasion. Wow, this is what gets rewarded around here. This is where I feel something from that. And you raise that line. So this is how you shape a culture, one conversation at a time, by recognizing that. So yeah, great, Leslie. Great. Thanks for reminding me.
I was going to say too, it really made me think through how even when you unfortunately see somebody doing something that's not right or that's incorrect, how you can use that same format to demonstrate for them why, you know, the what, the how, and the why. And you know what I'm saying? So really giving them clarity on purpose so that you can, like you said, bring them up in that discretionary efforts. So, you know, because I've worked with so many different types of people, some who were at all points in that discretionary effort, and some even below the line. And I was always trying to find ways to bring them up. So I think the way I was doing it might not have been the best approach. And I think even using that in ways to try to bring people up to certain performance standards would be helpful as well.
Wow. Yeah, great call out. I totally agree with that. That's a great way to frame it. Work both ways.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, but now that you've massaged people the right way and you're encouraging them into that upper quadrant, don't they get used to those kind of compliments? And now you have to ratchet it up another step and, I don't know, start handing out dollar bills or 10s or 20. I don't know. Do people get used to You know, does anyone ever get used to the kinds of things that, Lori or, things that were said today? Bob
Well,
said,
I'll be
I
a
don't know.
I'll be a wise guy. I don't know if you're married or have a significant other, but do you get tired of when they tell you they love you? I mean,
Ouch. That's a good point. Good point.
it's an emotional connection, right? We're not patronizing them. They've got to know that it's legit. If they think that you're trying to pull one over on me, oh, here comes Steve with his stupid narrative story again. I've lost it. But it's they got to be able to look you in the eyes and go, that's my advocate. That person is in this thing for me, and they support me and care about me. And once they know that, I don't think you could ever run out of bandwidth on like, oh, I've heard enough. Don't give me any more compliments. I just want to come in here and make the donuts. I don't think it works that way.
So Steve, so when Morris brought that up, here's what kind of came to mind for me. Two words. One is authenticity, and one is vulnerability. And I think relative to the authenticity piece is that if we're truth tellers relative to what's both good and maybe what's not so good, then the notion that I have to amp it up with $10 instead of $5, I don't know that necessarily applies. If that person thinks that they're going to get the good with the bad from me in a respectful way, well then when they do receive that positive reinforcement, that's really good. And the other thing too that I kind of notice is, boy, my heart goes out to leaders who are vulnerable when they basically say, I screwed up. And here's why I screwed up. It's almost like taking that same methodology and applying it to self and where either I messed up or somebody messed up that is looked at as a leader within the organization. Any thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, that alone adds to psychological safety in a humongous way. Remember, we looked at that as one of the key components for high performance. When a leader can say, look, I want everybody's mind in the game. By the way, I'm not going to see everything that's going on here. I'm probably going to be screwing up. And by the way, here's a mistake I made yesterday. I just want to share it with you guys. So everyone else feels like that's okay. That's what Google showed with those teams. And by the way, if you were dropping the ball, they weren't afraid to say, Steve, you're dropping the ball. Like, that's where people are so sensitive right now, culturally, that any kind of feedback is a lightning rod where they go, boom. So we have to be really smart about this. And we have to build a culture where that is part of how we operate. I'm not trying to offend people. I'm not by criticizing you. We're here together. We got important work to do. And if you're a professional and you want to get better at what we do, this is how we operate at my company. So yeah, and being vulnerable lays the groundwork for what we're expecting from other people. So I think that's a good call, Drew.
I think the other part to your question, Morris, I think, Steve, you're talking about the whole culture. It's not just a series of interactions. So today I have a good interaction with Morris, so I say thank you, but I don't have one tomorrow. So now I have to feel, do I have to say something to Morris because I said something yesterday, but today was just a normal, regular day. I think what I'm understanding is you're saying there should be a culture when people do great things that you make sure you take the time to say, hey, that was a great job because, or whatever. Let me give you the why. Let me make you feel good that you're aligned with where the team is going. You're getting great satisfaction. You're getting productivity. And so you're making the overall commitment that you want to be part of a culture that supports and recognizes people for great contributions, doesn't penalize them if something doesn't go the way we want. And Morris, you can turn around and then give that to somebody else, whether it's up, down, across, doesn't matter. And so people take it as belonging, being part of this team and being valued for the contribution. And when it makes sense, you do it. And when it doesn't, you just don't do anything.
Yeah. I think, Lori, we have to pick our moments too. Is it going to be public or is it going to be private? Everyone has sort of their own way of currency of how they like to receive that. when you're doing it publicly, there's a lot of other variables there. So other people are wondering, well, why don't I ever get any kudos, right? So it opens that complexity, but it also reinforces to them, if they're not doing it, that's what we want around here. So we have to just be very sensitive to that.
One of the things that I found very frustrating about the COVID thing, aside from it being a deadly global pandemic, is that it allowed social media, which I think was already problematic pre-COVID, to become a proxy for genuine, authentic human connection. And now, we're talking about things like, vulnerability and empathy and meaning. Now I can just go on your post on LinkedIn, click thumbs up, and feel like I've done something significant. I haven't. It's the simple, and there's LinkedIn has a purpose and it's fine. But when that becomes a stand-in for genuine, authentic human connection, the kind that we were not able to do for several months, I really think that's problematic. And I think the people in this webinar are poised to be champions for a return to the real deal. And I'm not saying, never to use LinkedIn again, but I think we have to pivot back to what really matters. And hopefully coming out of COVID will present a perfect opportunity for us on this webinar to begin that pivot back. I think we're in the best position to be able to reconnect to what really matters. Those are my thoughts.
Wow, that's deep. We could talk about that for an hour. That's absolutely. We like seeing how many likes our article or our posts get, right? But what are the things we're really interested in when somebody makes a comment? That's where we go, whoa, somebody commented. It wasn't just like a click, click, click. So I think we do need to consider this sort of fly-by-night way of kudoing or approving things and thinking about the deep things, as Mike said. You said it so much better than me.
It's a quality versus a quantity. You get rewarded on LinkedIn for quantity, not for quality. I think that goes right directly to Mike's point. So we're conditioning our new behavior to say, I like to as many people as possible, because indirectly that elevates perception of us, but it's not quality.
Mm-hmm.
And people know that once they start talking to you and meeting you, they realize it's like somebody that has an inauthentic LinkedIn profile. Once you start talking to them and you say, wait a minute, the profile is different than this person I'm talking to, it's very hard to build a trusted relationship that way.
Absolutely.
There was another Beacon session last week. I think it was life sciences that I had linked into, and they started talking about the fact that people are working obviously remotely more, that they want to continue to work remotely, and that they believe that they can continue to do their jobs just as effectively. And that may be so, but one of the comments I mentioned was, how do you sustain this connectivity that folks are talking about? How do you ensure that you're connecting hearts and minds, which is this purpose, working virtually without having that face-to-face contact? Because I said that much of human communication can be nonverbal, right? So I'm opening a different path here, but this whole aspect of connectivity and driving purpose and connecting hearts and minds, if we continue to work remotely, I think people have to work even harder to ensure the types of things that we're talking about today. Work harder to ensure that in your teams and your organizations, you are connecting hearts and minds. I think it's more difficult to do when you're not face to face.
Yeah, I agree. And Bob, that was the impetus for me creating that virtual team player playbook, because I realized those conversations that you're talking about weren't taking place on Zoom calls, and we have to be intentional about it. Just taking that time insert one question in every meeting. Let's spend some time calibrating our relationships, gang. That's what this is important. Let me go first.
Then
I'm sorry. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point. So that thanks for reminding me about that checklist, because it would be not only good to use if you're face-to-face in a team situation, but when you're remote as well, especially when you're remote, to your point. Yep.
Intention.
Another great thing to do is think about how you feel when somebody does it to you, for you. As I was listening to everyone thinking, I remember when my family had an affair and we were getting the RSVP cards back, and how nice it was that some people actually wrote little notes on the cards. And not just that they were coming and whether or not they were having fish or meat or whatever the choices were. And from that day forward, and it's been close to 20 years, whenever I receive an invitation, I always write a note now on the card, because I know like for that person to go to the mailbox. Remember the old days when you had paper response cards? And so I think if you try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, what made you feel good, realizing that they may like it slightly differently or whatever, you have to do it in their way. But the good feelings that you got becomes a habit and something that you begin to enjoy and value.
Great idea too.
So it seems like, 70 years after organizational psychology and organizational behavior became a legitimate field of study, we're back to the basics of human relationships, right? Which I find kind of ironic.
That is amazing. Yeah, I agree. That is amazing.
It's amazing. So my question for this esteemed group would be, how can we, because everyone's so dazzled, right, by artificial intelligence and the technology and all this great stuff, and that is important. But if we're putting out there that the glue that holds it all together is this stuff that, has always been the glue of human relationships, how do we convince our prospective clients that it deserves, that this type of subject matter deserves a seat at the table, along with all the other sexier stuff, which seems to be sort of the, where everybody's head is at these days. It seems a little old-fashioned to me to be talking about empathy and compassion and purpose. That's not sexy, So don't need an answer, just sort of more of a hypothetical.
Tie it to turnover. I mean, I know people who have started and ended jobs all within the pandemic, because you start a job, you never meet anyone in person, you never feel like anyone gets to know you, or you don't feel appreciated. I have a friend who it took 6 months before he even felt like his contributions to the team were making a difference. He's like, I don't know, I'm doing work, I'm going to meetings, but I have no idea what the bigger picture is, because he started during COVID. It took him, 6 months to get that sense. And if he was in person, it might have taken him 2 weeks. And then, other people who they don't want to stick around that long to find out. They just get frustrated and the turnover. So and to keep constantly having to fill roles, that's expensive, time consuming.
Sure.
Well, this is an opportunity for leaders to fill that gap that Mike's talking about, that Bob referred to, and that is, how do we get the team to feel included? How do we get the team to feel they matter? How do they sense the purpose of the team in relationship to the business, in relationship to the customer? That puts demands on a certain kind of leader, right? And those leaders, if we want to look at an historical sense, when the driver for business was shareholder value starting in the 80s, the compassion, the empathy, all that stuff was slowly drained out of the way businesses behaved. Now we're trying to bring that back. Why? Because employees are demanding it, especially coming out of this COVID period. They want to feel connected. I have a daughter who joined the company, and then 2 weeks later, she wasn't allowed to come into the office. she wants that community. She wants to see the people, have lunch with them, touch them, hear their voice in the same room. And I said, you got to find another company because they're not going to come back. They've decided not to bring him back. So she's not going to have that sense of community. So it's an opportunity for leaders or people that want to rise in the ranks to demonstrate they have that ability to engage their teams, to motivate their teams remotely, but the people feel more closely connected.
You know, Zoe, I just saw a statistic from SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management, that said 79% of new hires who quit their job, in other words, they're sort of in that honeymoon period and they like leave, it was due to lack of appreciation. 79%. So what your friend experienced, that sort of vacuum, especially with COVID being applied on top of it, brutal. So yeah, we have to be extra good at this right now, and that will get their attention because it's so expensive to hire people. And now with the labor market being really, really tight, it's really tough.
Fantastic. Great conversation. Really appreciate it. Mike, if you want to wrap us up, be cool. It's 9:30, I think, or 1 minute of.
Yeah, it's about 9:28. So again, just to sort of reiterate what I said earlier, thank you so much, Steve, for a provocative and outstanding presentation. I expected no less from you. And you delivered a grand slam. And I think the energy of the conversations and both in the chat and verbally are testament to the great job that you did.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.